So hi everyone, welcome to the L2's panel. So I think now we are at this stage where Solana is having lot of SVM folks, and I think now we have more than 12, 13 projects who are building on different SVM infrastructure. There's Sonic, which is building general purpose L2 with primary focus on gaming, and there is Zeta or Bullet, which is building a roll-up specific for perps. And apart from that, we have different SVM L1s as well, and then there's ephemeral rollups by Magic Blocks and so on. So yeah, in this panel, we'll just go why do Solana needs even L2s, and then we'll see what are different L2 solutions that exist right now. How does the go-to-market for each of these L2s or even different SVM L1s work, and how all it ties back to Solana as a broader thesis of IBRL that Solana mainnet is the layer for composability, and then there are different other rollups, L2s, and whatever forms they can exist in. So yeah, let's start with why do Solana need L2s, and I think I would like to know both of your viewpoints here, and then we can discuss more about on each of these viewpoints. So I'll first start with Chris here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Zhu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sonic SVM. We started out as a gaming-focused SVM environment to really push the use cases to a different level. We've now branched into different use cases, but still focused on what we call attention capital markets, which I would love to talk to you about, and entertainment products as a whole. We can probably dive into some of the rationales, but really, to put it simply, we started this not because of a cost. We think Solana is cheap enough and fast enough, and it's going to iterate towards a faster and cheaper future. However, there are use cases and data availabilities, for example, that are not that available for developers to build on top of, and some costs do not have to be configured as high as mainnet when designing, for example, fully on-chain gaming use cases and such and so forth. So that's why we started the whole project, and we can dive into the details later.
Great. And yeah, very nice to meet you all. I'm Tristan. I'm the founder of Bullet.xyz. We're building basically a app-specific chain for derivatives trading. So we actually have been around the Solana ecosystem for a long time, kind of formerly known as Zeta Markets. We were building one of the top perps platforms on Solana, previously doing options as well. So I've kind of built on Solana for almost 4 years at this point. I've seen the ins and the outs of developer experience, how things work in terms of building DeFi apps. And for us, it really came from a place of necessity. We were building a fully on-chain order book. We took some of the very old ideas from Serum, and we kind of built that out, and we did that for derivatives and perps trading. And that worked pretty well. We'd processed over $15 billion in trading volume, had over 100 to 150,000 active users on the platform, which is pretty good. But then we kind of hit, I think, a scalability ceiling in terms of that. If you've traded on, centralized exchange platforms, traditional exchanges, it's all like a latency game. If you've ever looked into HFT and stuff like that. So getting liquidity for us on chain, having price discovery on chain is really important, and that's what we wanted to build in there. And doing that through, on-chain order books was really difficult because the finite slot times, 400 milliseconds, is kind of 1 or 2 orders of magnitude too slow for what we needed to do. And the fact that, for example, if you're a market maker, you need to actually pay gas fees every time you place quotes. People are doing it. I think we were making up probably more than 5% of all Solana block space at some point. It was getting very expensive for us, getting very expensive for everyone else who was trading on our platform. So we went down the route of let's build Bullet, essentially. Let's build a network extension or a layer on top of Solana that still leverages a lot of the properties of Solana. We can store data on there. We can use the consensus mechanisms of Solana and use that robust L1 validator set. But we can take execution off there. We can get down to literally 2 milliseconds of latency time. We can get very high throughput. We don't have to deal with congestion from Pump Fun or NFT platforms and any of this kind of stuff. And we can build a professional grade trading experience natively on Solana.
Awesome. So let's start with a particular use case. Let's start with DeFi only first. So DeFi is built on the primary, I would say, promise of composability, right? And Solana, I think in 2021, the biggest narrative was composable finance and all of that. And that's how even Serum was birthed. And from there only Zeta was also initially a kind of a fork of Serum, but for perps, right? So what do you think about mainnet composability? And since you will be moving away from mainnet, what composability sacrifices are you making? And does composability even matter for perps, for instance? So I would love to dissect more into the composability part here.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, that's what brought me to Solana in the early days was just chatting to Tolly, and he's like, we want to build this NASDAQ on-chain. We want to have this one global state machine where everything kind of shares the same substrate. And that was really helpful. And I think it matters particularly for spot trading is really important. You have native token issuance there. You have all these different primitives that all layer and talk to each other. So it's really nice. Taking Jupiter as the example, you have all these underlying AMMs, Orca, Radium, many others, and Jupiter can kind of route between them and just do CPI calls, and everything just works magically. We found over the years, I guess, we tried to play more with composability, but I think the way that perps tends to shake out is they tend to vertically integrate. If you look at some of the top platforms out there, DYDX and Vertex and Hyperliquid and all these guys, they kind of have their own stack, and I don't think you need like aggregators and all these things built on top of it. So I think composability is nice, but it's fairly limited in the derivatives context of things. So we decided, hey, what do we care more about? Do we care more about perfect user experience, low fees, and like best performance, or do we want to go down the composability route? And I think that was fundamentally more important. So that is the big trade-off that we're making. We're getting 100x like faster speeds, but we are trading off some of that synchronous composability. I think with some of these like interop protocols and things happening there, you do get potentially some like asynchronous composability, which will be nice. So things maybe we can't do atomic swaps and arbitrages in the same block, but at least being able to layer those things and talk between the L1 and the L2, that's something that we're still figuring out. But we think for most perps traders, it's not the end of the world. If we can get the deposit and bridging experience into the L2 like really fast, and we think we can get it down to, we're pretty confident, a couple of seconds. It's almost invisible to the user. And if you can kind of go between these two layers and you get that massive UX improvement, we think that's a worthwhile trade-off.
Awesome. So I would now like to also understand from Chris, like, what are your views on composability, mainnet composability? And since you are like kind of a layer on top of Solana, how are you thinking about like composability with the Solana mainnet? In fact, like I think here it would be more about interoperability than composability. So yeah, like what are your views on like how you can leverage Solana's liquidity effects and the entire ecosystem benefits here?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one thing that I would want to point out is when we first started, kind of similarly, we looked at some of the largest gaming use cases on Solana, and they were driving actually more than 5%, 10% of the entire mainnet's block space at one point. This was DevCon, 2023 and early 2024. And with that block space, as well as kind of some congestions because of the asset issuance on top of Solana, the user costs were actually increasing exponentially. They were increasing from $1 when it was the bear market to $10 of margin, cutting into how much they would earn on a daily basis. So when you look at, for example, Star Alice, their users will be earning $15, $16, and now they're earning $7, $8. That is significant to the end user experience. So when we're thinking about what the users are really looking for and what the projects are looking for, they want to be able to issue their assets off of the Solana liquidity, and we don't want to fragment that liquidity. What we want to do is actually bring additional users, additional liquidity from other ecosystems, and kind of build on top of the mainnet experience. So for example, Tron, BNB, like these EVM chains, when they first started out, they were testing grounds for the EVM devs because they were cheaper. They also had better tooling in some specific use cases, and we thought to basically do the same. And basically for gaming or for entertainment purposes, one thing that we think is really important is not necessarily the speed or the latency. It's really the distribution and the liquidity that we're bringing to all of these apps. On Ethereum, you have the likes of BMX, Immutable X, Ronin, a lot of different gaming chains, side chains, L2s, whatever you want to call them, added up together, that's 12 billion, 15 billion of total liquidity. On Solana, if you add up all of the entertainment products and gaming products together, that would be less than $2 billion of liquidity at this current moment in time. I think over time, we've seen that there are a lot of developers who are looking for distribution, more users, but are not getting that for specific use cases. DeFi, however, great kind of brewing grounds for new projects within Solana, and we've seen amazing builders there as well. So when we're thinking about these additional use cases that we want to branch out to, one thing that we did was actually build out a distribution channel on top of TikTok. which had 2 million users of our own. We grew that through advertisement, through really acquiring users through our own token airdrops, and then staked other project tokens so that they can get hash key airdrops, they can get Sonic airdrops. And that application itself brought 500,000 net new traders into Solana and into Sonic, whose token or our token originally was launched on Solana only. And now, some liquidity is bridged over to our mainnet, but majority of that trading activity is still happening on Solana. Now we can actually then separate, the liquidity part with all of the state changes and activities that's happening on the L2. And that gives us a lot of, possibility to really focus the activity on the L2 while the consensus and liquidity stays on Solana. And we're increasingly doing that. In the early days of building Sonic, the SVM API wasn't there. The consensus execution, the runtime and client code base were coupled together. This was decoupled, last year in March or March to May or so. Now we have a lot more possibility of configuring the SVM runtime while keeping the original consensus mechanism the same.
Yeah, so that brings me to that question, which again I would ask why are you building on SVM and not EVM? Why choose SVM over EVM? EVM still has more TVL, or in fact, even you can say the ecosystem is still much bigger than SVM. So why did you both choose SVM here instead of EVM? And also, obviously, the developer experience is also much better in EVM, right? So what was your aha moment, or why did you chose SVM over EVM here?
I can go first. So I'll make one important clarification, which is currently Bullet doesn't have a virtual machine. We very much decided to go with no virtual machine, so we don't have strict kind of block gas limits and compute limits. This is actually something that was really tough building purely on the layer one. Is if you're building a purpose exchange where you need to do cross margin and you want to list more than, let's call it, 30 different assets, it's actually really hard because Solana's accounts model, our transaction model, you need to pass in, I guess, the number of accounts. And there's a hard cap of about 35 or so. I think if you take the Solana message size and divide it by whatever public key is, 32 bytes, you get to roughly 35 accounts. So there was stuff where we couldn't build the perfect margin engine that we wanted to with these kind of constraints. So we decided for at least the core of our exchange, let's strip away the virtual machine, let's just run it purely in Rust, and then we can do all the ZK verification and other stuff on top of that. We will be layering in SVM support. I think the reasoning behind that is we do want to grow an ecosystem. We want people to build vaults or stable coins or other things that leverage the perps primitives, the liquidity, for example, the funding rates. You can build another Athena type product on top of that, a Solana native one, which would be pretty cool. And I guess between EVM and SVM, I mean, we've been building on Solana for many years. It was just kind of a no-brainer that our audience, the people that would be kind of working with us, come from an SVM programming background. I also started on EVM 2020, I think, end of 2020. And no hate on it, but it's there's a lot of improvements or things left to be desired in the EVM programming world, from the actual language itself, as well as performance and the ability to parallelize code and execution. So yeah, I think also like Chris mentioned, I think SVM has been getting a lot better. It was very tightly coupled with a lot of the validator software, and now they've been pulling it out and making it more modular and easier to work with. So I think the tooling, as we've seen, is continuing to get better over the years, and the performance guarantees, the fact that it's all natively in Rust, which all of us program in and would compose natively with our kind of existing Rust stack, I think it was basically a no-brainer for us.
Yeah, huge shout out to Anza for that. I think they are doing a lot of work on decoupling SVM and just making it more friendly for other SVMs. And I think now there's I think Fogo is also coming, which is kind of a fire dancer fork. So I think now a lot of people have started experimenting around SVM code. So that's really amazing to see. Now talking particularly about Bullet, I can see that you are following kind of Hyperliquid playbook, right? I mean, Hyperliquid was also built initially on Cosmos SDK, and then they just bridged, used Arbitrum as a bridge. So is this the same playbook are you playing, where you are using Solana as a bridge initially, and later on it would be more coupled into the SVM stack? How are you thinking about the go-to-market here? And yeah, can we consider you as a Hyperliquid for Solana?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully so. That's what we're trying to do, is really bring a professional grade trading experience to Solana. That's for me been the painful thing I think looking at spot volumes on Solana, mostly driven by meme coins, it's been incredible to see. I think with Jupe and Radium and Pump Funds, like really brought a ton of adoption into Solana. A lot of trading volumes. Obviously, we flipped Ethereum and a lot of spot trading volumes for the majority of this year and last year, which is it's kind of mind blowing. From like 2 years ago when we were in the bear market and there was just no volume, no TVL on Solana. So that was really cool. But I've been kind of disappointed as someone building in a derivative space to not have seen perps volumes on Solana like track quite the same way. I think there have been like quite a few good platforms on Solana that have done a pretty good job. You know, ourselves, Jupiter, Drift, many others that have all tried to build good platforms. But I think when you talk to professional traders, there are things that are lacking. Like most of these platforms are AMM based. They're kind of taking the GMX model, which is kind of nice, I think, in that bootstrapping phase. But when you want like actual limit orders, when you want actual like low fees, which you can't get in the GMX type model because it needs to like self-sustain the LPs there. When you want really fast execution, when you want like reliable, like deterministic take profit and stop loss orders, like all these things that professional traders want, it's really hard to do in that kind of model. So we've been trying to target and listen to a lot of user feedback on what they want there and build the best experience possible. And yeah, I think seeing platforms like Hyperliquid do so incredibly well, seeing them taking market share from centralized exchanges and bringing more people on chain is like very admirable. And I'm like very happy to see that the tides are turning. I think we went from in the bear market, maybe 5% of decentralized exchange dominance, especially on the perp side. Now we're probably 15 maybe or 20%, which is pretty nuts. And it like keeps going up. So in terms of our go-to-market, yeah, very much we want to be that kind of professional grade trading platform on Solana. We want to bring in a bunch of professional traders and volume in there and give a really good trading experience. So I think that looks like, you know, going out there and finding people who are on other chains or trading on kind of centralized exchanges, telling them the benefits of like trading on chain, that they self-custody their own assets, that everything is kind of transparent and verifiable on chain, which is really nice. And the more that we can grow the pie there, get more people in there, get, I think, especially price discovery happening on more Solana native assets, of which there are now like literally millions, I think that will be really cool.
Awesome. And like, what can be the latency we expect when we trade on Bullet?
Yeah, so we set out to get to like 50 milliseconds because we're like, let's get roughly like an order of magnitude. We smashed that. We got it down to 5 milliseconds a couple of months ago, and then we smashed that again and we got it down to 2 milliseconds, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we just spent a lot of time like optimizing. I think now at this 2 millis mark, we're like, okay, we're probably done here. It's like good enough. It's actually faster than, or should be faster than centralized exchanges. I think Binance is roughly 20 milliseconds. So the fact that we can get lower with at least our current load of couple of hundred TPS, we'll see it at scale at like 10,000 TPS. I'm pretty confident that it will do similarly. But you might think like, who cares about a couple of milliseconds? Like, what difference does that make to the end user? And that's like a very valid thing to ask. But interestingly, if you peel back the layers and you look under the hood, how markets work that you've seen on, you know, Robinhood and some of these other big platforms, it's really like a supply and demand problem. And in derivatives markets, yeah, it's very much a chicken and egg thing. If you have no liquidity, no users are going to come in there because you have wide spreads and it just sucks to trade on. But if they come in there, very tight spreads, which you kind of need to incentivize and need to have the right infrastructure for market makers to be able to adjust. You know, crypto prices move very quickly. They need to be able to readjust. And if you're building this AMM that updates every 400 milliseconds or an Ethereum every couple of seconds, you're just getting arbitraged all the time. LPs are losing a bunch of money. Like when you look at the markouts on Uniswap, you know, all the LPs are getting fleeced. You don't really get that on limit order book exchanges or ones that are performant enough. And so you can actually get sustainable market microstructure happening there. Once you have that, you have the liquidity. Users will come in because they can actually trade efficiently. They won't just bleed money essentially. And then the people who are providing the liquidity are actually profiting, I guess, off the spread there. And then you get this whole virtuous cycle happening. So I think, yeah, the more that we can bootstrap that and get that going, that'll be good.
Awesome. So now let's talk about go-to-market for Sonic. Like, how are you thinking of attracting more and more users? I think like you mentioned that one playbook is like you follow the immutable X playbook where you focus on like particular market segments. So what are the market segments you are most excited about to bring to Sonic, or just like in general bring more and more users to Solana?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a different kind of flywheel that's going on in the verticals that we're looking at. The flywheel that we're looking at is basically how many new users can we bring in from additional traffic pools, TikTok, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, what we call, traditional attention markets, no capital, so to speak. And then once we bring those users in, how much can we retain for a new asset that they can potentially get? Give them a stake. For example, Sonic Token initially, now there's a lot of ecosystem projects building on top of us. Just hosted our mainnet hackathon for around 260 projects, amongst which 16 or so we believe can go out and launch their assets there as well. Now you take those stake and then give it back to the users that's acquired through these traditional application channels, and then it actually decreases the amount of money you have to incentivize to these users directly, because they now hold the assets and they have a stake within the ecosystem. So we grow this kind of user pool by continuously doing that over and over again. And for Sonic, for example, we were only required to give out around 0.5% of our total supply for 500,000 total users that were using our TikTok application. Each one of them received around $50 to $60 of airdrops by the first day. Now, maybe not all of them sold that at that exact price point, but for any application of that magnitude, acquisition cost is a significant reward for these users. So kind of moving forward, what we're really excited to kind of bring onto our channels is actually trying to acquire these the same type of users through these traditional channels, and then bring them in as additional traders and liquidity into Solana. And when we started out, as a gaming L2 focused on games, that was also because that liquidity was missing from Solana. And now when we're looking at the entire landscape, we actually think that there are way more interesting ways for us to actually launch assets off of TikTok. The previous version of our mini app, for example, had a huge limitation when we didn't own the front end. We actually didn't own the order flow that's actually routing towards, for example, Solana or Sonic's DEXs. But now when we're thinking about the new distribution channels, we're thinking about our own front end, a web app or for example, a browser that can basically aggregate all of those transactions, and we can route those transactions into our order books or a partner's order books, and then charge very thin fees on top of that. And we've seen that play out with the likes of Jupiter, with Pump, where aggregation of multiple contracts or multiple exchanges actually allows the front end protocol to capture a lot of value as well. So that's a long-winded answer. Aside from basically gaming, we're now looking to AI, and we're looking to attention capital markets, which is basically all of the existing traffic channels, social media apps, and then trying to turn those mind shares into assets in certain way or form. And I think Kaido did a very good job here, where they actually index all of the data from YouTube, from Instagram, or maybe not Instagram, Twitter, and all these social media apps, and then basically calculated based on their own algo what that would translate to in terms of mindshare on specific platforms. So they just rolled out, for example, Yaps.market, which utilizes that data feed and then produces value for these new projects. But on Solana, for example, data is a huge problem, and the traditional markets data are not being stored on-chain and not turning into on-chain points or on-chain, I guess, rewards. So that's the middle point that we have to solve.
Yeah, makes sense. And also, since you touched upon like attention capital markets, like, can you give like 3-4 use cases on like what are the different use cases that can be built, let's say today on Sonic or even on Solana, or in fact like any chain? Like, what are the primary use cases you are looking forward for?
Yeah, we'll go with Sonic, and then I'd love to ask you for Solana.
Yeah.
And Yash is like one of the largest leading opinion leaders on this topic as well. So in terms of Sonic, a couple use cases that we've seen. One that I'm actually very interested in is a vertical app that allows live stream and then launches tokens with a very clear set of mindshare metrics, as well as very clear compliance guidelines, right? Something like Pump being more permissionless than some of the other social media apps had a really wild period of time on live stream. But that can be curated on app form and goes through Apple with very, very high precision in compliance. Another one that we're looking at is basically meme coin launchpad before good, right? Charity-based meme launchpads that capture societal attention on some type of charity events, and then turn that into assets on top of Solana and Sonic with pools on both sides. And then one of our other winners is turning all of the gaming assets and IPs of traditional kind of larger conglomerates, and then launching that with a fair launch model. So instead of the large companies owning a lot of IP and not allowing people to use it, anything on this platform is automatically for free able to be minted off of those IPs, and then you can trade and then speculate on top of those. And then the last one is basically a Discord-based, the Discord and Twitch-based kind of like plugin that allows you to monetize the impressions and attention off of these applications. But those are just some examples where I would say like these are all attention capital markets, so to speak. But on Solana, anything interesting?
Yeah, on Solana, I think like Pump is the OG attention capital markets. I think like it's the biggest attention capital exchange, you can say, because anytime you see like any events or any meta comes up, you will see like thousands of Pump coins like being built on, being made for that, and one or two of them succeed, and they'll become the default meme coin of that event or meta. So I think like Pump is the OG, obviously attention capital markets. But what I believe that like in Solana as well, the verticalization of Pump will start happening. So there would be like different verticals, which will be basically like pumpification of different verticals. It can be music, for example. Time.fun is a very good example that it monetized, like it basically quantified the time of individuals, and it's now a capital markets for time. So I think like that's a very good, I would say, Pump vertical, where it's same as like bonding curve mechanism, and then there's like graduation to Radium or Meteora, and then people keep earning like LP fees, but it just like focus on one vertical, which was time. So I think like overall on attention capital market, it will be like focusing on different things. So it can be even like something like gaming as well, like where people are building different games and they're launching it with a token. So it can be game coins. It can be also app coins. Like people are launching a lot of apps, and each app has its own token, and people are launching it almost every day. So I think like at the end, attention capital markets, like if you can convert anything as a content, and you can like also coin it. I think like even Base started doing this, like coining all the content. So that's also a example of good example of attention capital markets. It's just like they could have done it better, but I think overall like these are all examples of attention capital markets. So yeah, really excited for this vision play out throughout the rest of year, where we move from just meme coins to app coins, game coins, content coins, and all sorts of random coins. So yeah, let's move further into the L2's discussion. One more thing I wanted to ask, like whether we should have like more roll-ups on Solana or more roll-apps on Solana, or basically like just more application specific SVMs or more general purpose SVM. Like I think you are taking more on the general purpose side, and you are taking more on the application specific side. So yeah, I would love to understand like what are your viewpoints on like which one should be more preferable? And this is not I'm talking about your own companies, but in general about Solana or SVMs.
Yeah, I can actually go first. We are general to a certain extent where there's a focus and use case, but we also have DeFi primitives and ecosystem building first. And I think for DeFi it might be a little bit different. I would love to hear your thoughts, but for us, there needs to be a thin layer of liquidity that can actually get interoperable, between Solana mainnet and Sonic. Otherwise, there will be no money on our chain, and there will be no trading activity on our chain. So when we first start out building our ecosystem, there needs to be a DeFi trap so that we can pick the lending, the LST, the DEX, and the stablecoins projects on top of us, even though they can directly be ported over from Solana. And I think that's something, coming back to our last topic, something Solana does very, very well is because of the EVM issues that we've seen the previous era when the different L2s kind of rolled out, the optimistic L2s, the ZK L2s, and their programming models and the interfaces were different, which allowed the developers to really have to choose and stay on, the L2s. And because the mainnet was too expensive, they can't really go back to mainnet. But for Solana, the SVM itself, Solana itself, is actually used as the the interface for all of the SVMs. We are updating our SVMs as Onza is updating Agave codebase, and we're keeping in line with all of that programming interface. So what ends up happening is that as long as we have the tool set that Solana has, we can fork everything, and the developers actually have a cheaper and better testing ground for certain use cases, whilst the mainnet stays for liquidity. So, a lot of our teams are developing both simultaneously on top of Solana and on top of L2, or Sonic, which was not the case for most of the Ethereum L2 projects. So I think that's one of the key differentiations. And now we think that a general purpose L2 without a focus on Solana does not need to exist. And that's also why there is fewer L2s on Solana in general, even though, we've seen the EVM boom and there is monetary value to be captured for sure. But without a reasonable use case and specific focuses, the liquidity can just stay on Solana. And for our case, only 10%, 20% of the attention capital markets tokens need to really be on Sonic to have that circulation of liquidity. And most of the activity, the trading activities and the settlements can still happen on Solana. That's our thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, largely agree with Chris on that. Yeah, I think our point was like specificity is something I've learned over the last couple of years is really important to have a focus. And for us, we're not like a massive team either. We're very like app specific, app focused. So I wasn't really interested in building a massive ecosystem, bootstrapping all this stuff, and essentially like reinventing the wheel. Like, do we need another LST platform? Do we need another like lending platform? Do we need all these things like reinvented on like a layer 2 for the sake of it? I feel like that's kind of been the Achilles heel of Ethereum, is like you just got a bajillion L2s and then people just copy paste the same stuff. And we weren't really keen to do that because I think everything already works pretty well in Solana because it scales. You've already got a lot of the Lego blocks there. So for us, it was like a very focused approach of like, let's just narrow in and let's just like basically build the product that we were trying to build and not worry too much about the infra or make that the focus of the thing, just still very much be application focused, and just basically build that stack underneath it that enables, but still try and interface with the end customer and the end user. And so, yeah, I think that's been kind of good. We can make very opinionated choices and move very quickly on that. Instead of my worry has always been, you go out there and you're like, hey, we're an ecosystem, build a bunch of stuff on top of us. You work with a bunch of teams who maybe don't fully get it or that you can't have like full discretion over. But for us, we can kind of make all those choices and make it really fast and really good. But yeah, like to maybe take a step back, I had this conversation with Toli when we were kind of going through that pivot into thinking about L2s, and he kind of begged me, he was like, please don't build an Arbitrum on Solana. He's like, we don't need this general purpose layer. He's like, the fees are already like relatively cheap. We already have more throughput than like all L2s combined. Like we don't need this. And our goal was never like purely a scalability solution for Solana in terms of TPS. Like we're not even bottlenecking on Solana TPS on our like layer 1 exchange that we were running. We were maybe doing like 30 plus or something, or other. Solana's doing like a couple of thousand now, so like we weren't even hitting the limits there. But it was basically just like the latency stuff that we were trying to optimize. So we just really focused on that and just really focused on the perps experience. And I think it'll be cool over time. We will kind of expand out a little bit once we found really solid product market fit and certain niches and certain verticals that need to go out there. But yeah, I think there's definitely like a mistake of going too wide too early, trying to tackle every problem under the sun. And I think it's just like death by 1,000 cuts essentially, where you never even like deliver one good product.
Yeah, I think on EVM side, Abstract also has a good approach where they build their own front end, and whatever apps which gets built on Abstract, like they get featured on the front end. So I think like it's also like one of the models like which I think like you are also exploring on, like how you can like aggregate all the different apps being built on Sonic. So do you think like in future all the different L2s or even SVMs, like they all will tend towards becoming more of a super app where there's a simple front end for accessing anything on your roll-ups or different SVM things, and then like kind of like you're already like kind of in that direction where there's only one front end for accessing anything on your let's say instance or chain, right? So what do you think about like front ends accruing most of the value, and maybe like in future your margins become so thin on the L2 side or your own chain side that you accrue only value towards through the front end? So what's your thesis on like front end accruing more fees rather than infra?
I can go first.
Yeah.
So I think the end game is not about like whether the front end is going to accrue all of the value. I think the end game for chains, at least, is that we all tend towards the same end game, which I don't know if we've talked about this, but I think from Hype, from Solana, and from BNB, and even Tron, there are three successful and really successful business models in crypto. The first one is exchanges, whether DEX or centralized exchange. And the choice really just depends on latency and speed and the technical differences. The second is launching assets and more, more specifically stable coins for cross-border USD payments. And then the third is basically off of the exchange and the assets, you now have a chain, which generates revenue by launching additional assets on top of the chain, which then becomes an exchange almost as well. So now I think every single chain, if you think about Hype, whether it starts off with a super app and then move into Hyper EVM, or Tron starts off with basically a gaming or entertainment focused chain, buys BitTorrent and then moves into decentralized media and then goes into payments. And then gets integrated into exchanges. Or BNB, you have exchange and then you use the exchange to launch your chain and then settle a lot of assets on top of your DEX. Now that the tech is there, we're all tending towards the same end game. And now for us, building a new L2 or chain extension, whatever you want to call it, going backwards from that end game, how do we build that, right? You either build it from a super app that is exchange and then go down towards the chain layer like you guys are doing, or you start with a chain and then you find your distribution and channel that fits the chain's narrative as well as technical specs. And this is where I think one of the products that we're incubating, we want it to be the largest front end that all crypto native users use, and then it branches out to even larger traffic pools and bring them in. We're really good at vampire attacking traditional media channels, social media channels, and bring those users in. But that front end itself is basically just an exchange. And without the trading activities that happen on the exchange or the launching of assets that happen off of that front end, there wouldn't be as much activity and there would be nothing bring back to the chain. So the front end doesn't necessarily have to accrue all of the value, but it has the option to accrue all of the value because the trading activity is happening there. And that's how we bootstrap the network, by giving stake to the guys that are least or the most, the least skeptical and the most acceptable to new assets. That's kind of my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. That's a cool take. I think it's an interesting, nuanced question. I think the distinction to make here is we're essentially building a protocol. It's very different to just a pure app. If you were Robinhood, it's just one business, everything goes through that. They own the app, they own the desktop, they own the back end, everything is just kind of together. There's no real public APIs or ability for other people to contribute. And I think the beauty with crypto is you have this kind of more permissionless platform that anyone can tap into. And yes, we probably start more looking like one of those apps in the early days where it's we have that first implementation of the front end, people trade on it, people start to like it, but I want people to come in there, I want them to build a killer mobile app that is just very optimized towards certain types of trading. If people want to trade more kind of meme coin type assets, you want to kind of gamify it a bit more, make it fun. If someone wants to take that on, we just have the APIs for people to be able to integrate into that. And the beautiful thing is, if we get liquidity and trading volumes really good on the core exchange, people just tap into that essentially. It's not like you have to come in, I got to reinvent the wheel, build my exchange. I got to find the market makers, find, user acquisition stuff and bootstrap it there. It's you're already tapping into a pretty robust backend for a bunch of these things. And if you want to charge high fees on that and make a different business model on that, that's great. You earn, and then it also accrues value to the chain, which should, accrue value to potentially token holders or something like that. So I think there's a really nice virtuous cycle going there. So yeah, I think that's the good thing that's where I see composability coming in. New people building front ends. I think trading is really cool because there's a lot of algo automated trading stuff that happens. People build these trading terminals. If someone wants to use a CLI or build their own grid trading bot, that is also another thing that can tap in, and they can charge their own fees to their own end users. And that's when you start having all these things that funnel into this one kind of set of matching engines, essentially all these markets. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, you see that with, I guess, traditional finance, everyone's got their own brokers and offering their own services, but that's all channeling into the same matching engine in place the price discovery happens.
And I think on just continuing on that question, particularly for Bullet, would someone need a separate wallet apart from the Solana wallet, or all the settlement would be on the Solana mainnet itself. Like, what would be the UX for a user? Like, would it be same as they are using any other perps like Drift, Jupyter, Flashrate, and all of that, or would it be different from that? Like, yeah, tell us more about the UX part.
Yeah, it's a good question. We're trying to make it as seamless as possible. I want this like layer 1.5 type experience when, I think on, I've bridged a base in places like that. It's like, I gotta wait 15 minutes for my funds to go in, and then I gotta change my RPCs on my MetaMask wallet, and then I gotta deal with all this stuff, and I have different assets on different chains. Some of that is somewhat unavoidable. Some of it you can do, I think, smart stuff on the UX side of things. So the way that we're trying to tackle it is we have full control over cryptography schemes, addressing schemes, stuff like that. So we use, base 58 addresses, so it looks very familiar to the Solana stuff. We use the same ED 25519 signature scheme, so your Phantom wallet will work, your Backpack wallet will work, all these things will kind of work out of the box, which is very important in my opinion. Like, I don't want to force people into using MetaMask, like it's just going to be painful for people. There will be like a need to bridge essentially, but like I said, because we are using Solana for data availability, we can get this extremely quick. So within Solana finality, essentially within 15 seconds, or we could probably do even less if we wanted to, people will be able to bridge. I think that almost feels like using something on the L1, you bridge there, and then suddenly you kind of like sign that initial session key kind of prompt, and then you can just trade. And the beautiful thing is, if you've traded on some of the perp dexes like, Drift or whatever, you have to sign every transaction. If you see a nice price that you want to grab, it's kind of like a painful process to do that all the time. But with our system, it's really nice. You basically log in there, you bridge funds, so you got your funds in there within, let's call it 10 seconds. We work with Privy, who do this kind of wallet account abstraction type stuff. So you go in there, you can bring your existing Solana wallet to authenticate, or you can log in with Google and bridge your funds in there. So you don't have to worry about passkeys and stuff like that. You sign that session key, and then you can just go ham essentially and go and trade very quickly. And then getting your funds out of there, you will have to wait for basically optimistic settlement. But once we move to like ZK fraud proofs, I think we can get that down to 15 minutes. So I think once your funds are in the chain, it should be like fairly painless to get them in there. And then once they're there, we have so much discretion around how to change things and how to make them super slick. And I think we can basically get an almost centralized exchange like login experience going there, which I think will be like a big unlock when you're going to like a more less crypto native audience, I would say.
Yeah, I really like session keys here because I think like it's a huge UX unlock. I think like it was introduced back in 2021, 22, but it wasn't used a lot. I think now it's again coming back. In fact, like we are also releasing a game tonight itself using session keys. So like you can do like infinite number of transactions like which with any latency you want. So I think like that's a really smart solution. So now moving on to the last question, I think like how many L2s or rollups or L1s would Solana have? Like, what's your? I wouldn't say like even number estimation, but what do you think like would be the end goal here? Like, would there be like 1 million rollups, or would there be like 1,000 rollups, or would there be 100 rollups, or like it can be even L1s rollups, or what types of SVMs you want to call? I'll ask with start.
Yeah,
with
I mean, sorry to David Hoffman from Bankless, just don't agree with him on the millions of roll-ups theory. I just don't think we need it. Like I said, like Solana is a general purpose chain and a performant one at that, so it caters to the vast majority of use cases. So yeah, I think as Chris also correctly identified, I don't think we need a bajillion like additional chains. It just fragments liquidities. There's definitely like we've seen how that is hamstrung Ethereum in their current roadmap, and it's caused all this fragmentation. And it's weird to see them backflip now and be like, let's scale the L1, and it's like all back to front essentially. So no, I think there's going to be a pretty limited number, and as with all kind of things, applications in crypto, it's kind of like a winner takes most, or I think like the long tail kind of ends up just like fading into irrelevance. So I don't know, maybe like 10 is a reasonable number, 5 to 10, we'll see like what different use cases. Like I think gaming is a very strong one. I think there's probably something in deep in AI that makes a lot of sense. People are working on certain like compression protocols. I think the trading stuff, you're probably going to see us. I'm sure there'll be other ones that pop up as well. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be an infinite amount, and I think it's good to keep it kind of small and focused if we can kind of focus liquidity into those places, but that's just my guess.
Yeah, I think on the order of magnitude, I'm with Tristan on, 10 to 100 maybe is like similar order of magnitude. But that's before one of them hits, $10 billion, $20 billion of FTV. And if that happens, we're going to see a lot because it's forking and it's just easier. But I think winner takes all will be the end state where there might be a lot, but the relevant ones are going to be very limited to tens of amounts. And
I think it also depends on the tooling. Like if you guys are building generalized L2 tooling, that's the way for, it's kind of like what Conduit and other guys are doing, like spin up your own OP chain. And here we'll have this kind of network extension stack that anyone can go and spin up their own chain.
That's what we were thinking originally, was that we can, basically give this tooling to all the other devs that want to build their L2s. But I think it's like, is there eggs first or chicken first, where if you don't own the distribution and don't own the users, why would you build another chain who are using it too? And I think the infra game itself is actually already over or close to being over, unless you have something that is very, very different. So, yeah.
I agree. That's actually a big draw of why people come to Solana L1 in the first place, is like not necessarily the tech anymore, but people, second-time founders, I think, realize distribution is so important. And so you see all these people coming from EVM land. They're like, I want to be in Solana right now because I can just tap into like 100,000 users day one, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. So yeah, we are almost at the end of L2's panel. So I think like overall the message is clear that there would be like a lot of different SVMs being built on top of Solana. I think like mostly it will be use case specific. For example, Tristan is building for perps, and then Chris is building for gaming and attention capital markets. So I think like every app can have like some components which is like not on Solana mainnet, but overall I believe that Solana mainnet would be the ultimate chain, and it's not like Ethereum where it's the infrastructure of B2B chain, but Solana will always be the B2C chain. So yeah, that was the L2's panel, and yes, see you around here. And yeah, thanks for the for your takes here.
Yep.
Thank you, Alex. All right, thanks everyone.